about sleep. This video tells you about the circadian system that is important also in regulation of sleep. The biological clock is an adaptation tool that guides to anticipate regularly repeating events in our environment. For primitive organisms, it is vitally important. For instance, animals that live in the seashore need to know when the tide comes in so they can come out to feed, and also to know when the water goes out so they can dig themselves into the mud in order to avoid drying in the sun. All organisms, including humans, have biological clocks, and their correct function is important for performance and health. It is difficult to find a physiological function that would not be rhythmic. Some of the most familiar rhythms are body temperature rhythm, melatonin and cortisol rhythms, and of course sleep-wake cycle. Each rhythm has its own shape with different times for trues and maximum amplitudes. In healthy organism, the different rhythms are synchronized and form a physiologically meaningful and functional entity. How do we know that the basic rhythm is inborn, produced within the organism, and not by environmental conditions? The earliest experiments in circadian physiology use the mimosa plant that closes its leaves for night. The researchers asked if this was induced by the change from light to darkness, or does the plant continue its movements in constant lighting condition? Once the question was asked, it was easy to test. The researchers took the plant and placed it in constant darkness and observed that the movement continued, so the rhythm was produced within the plant. The center clock of the body is the suprachiasmatic nucleus in the hypothalamus. If it is lesioned, the rhythm disappears. The duration of the rhythm cycle is called tau. In humans, it is usually slightly longer than 24 hours. Tau can be measured in constant darkness. The basic rhythm is generated by genes. This was detected from experiments that produced mutants of one clock gene per. The long tau variant produced rhythms that were longer than 24 hours, and the short variant shorter than 24 hours. The variant without functional per gene, the per zero variant, was arrhythmic. The suprachiasmatic nucleus is situated above the optic chiasm in the lower part of the hypothalamus. Here is a cartoon of sleep-wake cycle. When entrained, the person goes to sleep each night at about same time and wakes up at the same time. When moved to an environment where he or she doesn't get clues of time of the day, the rhythm cannot be entrained and starts to free run. In other words, starts to express the inborn tau of the rhythm. This means that each night the person goes to sleep a few minutes later if the tau is slightly longer than 24 hours and wakes up a bit later. This continues till the entrainment cue, for instance light, is restored, re-entraining the rhythm. If the suprachiasmatic nucleus is lesioned, the rhythm remains to be entrained in light, but in constant darkness it disappears. Entrainment can be induced by several cues, but the most important is light. Food, temperature, and social interaction can also act as entrainment cues. Light entrainment has a specific route to the suprachiasmatic nucleus via specific receptors that are sensitive to blue light. The timing of the light exposure is crucial for entrainment. The next slides explain these features in more detail. The pathway that conveys light information to the suprachiasmatic nucleus is the retina-hypothalamic pathway, which is partially or completely separate from the ordinary visual tract in the optic nerve. In the retina, light is sensed by specific ganglion cells that use melanopsin as their photopigment. These cells are most sensitive to light at wavelength 410 nanometers, which is shorter than the maximal sensitivity range for the visual photopigments of rods and cones. Entrainment of the rhythm by light can take place only at certain times of the day, either at dawn or dusk. This feature is illustrated by the phase response curve. Here you can see times for successful entrainment, and here are time points when light doesn't entrain rhythms. You can also see the amplitude of the entrainment and the direction to which the rhythm moves, either phase advance or phase delay. The amplitude of the curve tells the maximum amount of phase resetting. In humans, 1 hour phase resetting per day could be obtained, but in practice it is usually less. This means that a flight, for instance, to New York with 7-hour time difference would induce a 7-day period during which the circadian rhythm is resetting to the new time zone. This is how it works. This is the time of a person starting to sleep at about 7 o'clock in the evening. If we want to re-entrain the sleep-wake rhythm with light, the light can be administered either in the evening or in the morning. If we want a phase advance, the light is administered in the morning. Next day, the person goes to bed earlier and wakes up earlier. If we want a phase delay, the light is administered in the evening, and then the person goes to bed later and wakes up later. The rhythm is created in the suprachiasmatic nucleus. The principle is simple and it is similar in all species. However, several additional regulatory mechanisms are involved in more developed species, including humans. The core rhythm consists of 4 genes: PER, TIM, SIC, and CLK. In the cycle, the SIC and CLK genes bind to the regulatory area of PER and TIM genes, inducing expression of these genes. The products are transported from the nucleus to cytoplasm, where they combine to a conglomerate that moves back to nucleus and binds to the regulatory area of the TIM and PER genes, terminating their expression. The procedure then repeats itself at a certain pace, forming the basis of the circadian rhythm cycle. In mammals, the gene ortholog for CLK is the clock gene. In the course of evolution, the number of gene variants has increased. For instance, the PER gene in humans has 3 variants: PER 1, 2, and 3. The individual phase references have genetic background called chronotype. The early birds and night owls have different preferred times for going to sleep and waking up. These genetic variants give rise to the circadian phenotype, which in case of late phase preference has adverse effects on health. Here you can see epidemiological data from late and very late chronotypes. On the x-axis, the number represents deviation from bedtime at 11 o'clock. So 6-hour deviation would mean a bedtime 5 in the morning. The larger the deviation is, the more problematic behavior the subjects report. Here you can see smoking, alcohol consumption, depression, and caffeine consumption. So the chronotype and circadian rhythms have significance also for humans. The most common cause of disturbances in circadian rhythms are jet lag and shift work. Disturbed sleep is almost an inevitable consequence of disturbed circadian rhythm and is the most common complaint in connection with both jet lag and shift work. So take good care of your rhythms and sleep well.